Think you know what a bus looks like? A boring, boxy metal rectangle, right? Think again. Today we are diving deep into automotive history to uncover the 10 weirdest, most bizarre vintage buses and microbuses you have never seen before. Get ready for an absolutely wild ride through the hidden chapters of global transportation history. But these aren't just crazy designs. Each of these jaw-dropping machines was meticulously engineered to solve a massive, seemingly impossible real-world problem. Plus, one of the famous vehicles on this very list was eventually considered so radically dangerous by federal safety standards that its entire design style was effectively banned. Can you guess which one it is? Hit that subscribe button, leave a comment, and watch until the very end to find out. We begin our journey over a century ago in the Edwardian era, a time when driving a large passenger vehicle was a grueling, bone-rattling physical nightmare. Early mechanical gearboxes were so notoriously primitive and heavy that drivers practically needed the strength of an ox just to shift gears without destroying the transmission. Enter the Tilling-Stevens petrol-electric, a bus that looks like a traditional, towering double-decker from the outside, but hides a mind-bending, highly advanced secret underneath its classic British coachwork. Visually, it boasted a prominent open-air driver's cab and a massive heavy-duty brass radiator, looking every bit like a steampunk behemoth rumbling down the cobblestone streets of early 20th century London. To completely solve the dreadful gearbox problem, the genius engineers at Tilling-Stevens simply got rid of the mechanical gearbox altogether. Long before modern hybrids existed, this 1910s marvel utilized a petrol engine coupled directly to an electrical generator. This generator, in turn, powered an electric motor that drove the rear wheels. There was absolutely no clutch pedal and no gear stick. The driver controlled the speed smoothly and silently, simply by using a throttle pedal and a series of electrical resistance switches. It was a remarkably seamless transmission system that entirely bypassed the primitive mechanical limitations of the era. The Tilling-Stevens petrol-electric became an absolute lifesaver for early transit operators. It proved so incredibly reliable that it saw extensive military use during World War I, where its onboard generator was used not just to drive the bus, weighing over 10,000 pounds, but to power massive anti-aircraft searchlights on the battlefield. However, as mechanical gearboxes eventually became synchronized and easier to use, this early hybrid marvel quietly faded into obscurity. Yet, while the British were pioneering smooth electrical power to conquer terrible gearboxes, brilliant engineers over in the United States were about to tackle an entirely different problem: how to make a family vehicle look like a luxurious aerodynamic Beetle. Welcome to the 1930s. An era where family transportation meant cramming into a stiff, bumpy, and incredibly cramped sedan with a massive hood taking up half the vehicle's length. Automotive aviation pioneer William B. Stout looked at these rigid designs and decided the world desperately needed a spacious, rolling living room. His spectacular solution was the Stout Scarab, widely considered by historians as the world's very first production minivan. If you saw one of these rolling down the street today, you might think an Art Deco spaceship had landed. It featured a smooth, teardrop-shaped aluminum body inspired by the Egyptian scarab beetle, completely ditching the traditional running boards and distinct fenders to maximize the interior volume. The engineering behind the Scarab was brilliantly unorthodox and heavily inspired by aircraft design. To create that cavernous interior, Stout pushed the wheels all the way to the far corners of the chassis and placed a reliable Ford V8 engine in the absolute rear of the vehicle. This completely eliminated the bulky driveshaft tunnel running through the cabin, allowing for a perfectly flat wooden floor. Inside, the Scarab was a marvel of modular luxury. Except for the fixed driver's seat, every single passenger chair could be unbolted, turned around 180 degrees, or reconfigured around a small fold-out table. Utilizing aircraft-style aluminum space frame construction, Stout managed to keep this massive lounge-like structure surprisingly lightweight and rigid. Unfortunately, the Stout Scarab was simply too far ahead of its time. Its bizarre bug-like appearance shocked the conservative public, and its exorbitant price tag, costing around $5,000, which was more than a luxury Packard at the time, meant that fewer than 10 were ever produced. Today, it stands as a legendary, visionary masterpiece that predicted the modern minivan layout by nearly half a century. But while the Scarab tried to create a spacious lounge by moving a heavy V8 engine to the back, post-war Germany was about to take the concept of maximizing space in a completely different, highly efficient direction. Emerging from the devastating ashes of World War II, a recovering Germany faced a monumental logistical crisis. They desperately needed an incredibly versatile, highly efficient transport vehicle that could haul maximum cargo while using minimal materials and sipping tiny amounts of fuel. The ingenious answer came in 1949 from Auto Union with the DKW Schnelaster, which translates directly to rapid transporter. Visually, this microbus is undeniably quirky. It features an utterly charming snub-nosed front end, a distinctively sloped hood, and a remarkably aerodynamic profile that makes it look like a metallic loaf of bread, gliding down the Autobahn at a modest top speed of 45 miles per hour. The sheer historical genius of the Schnelaster lies in its pioneering drivetrain layout. To solve the problem of maximizing cargo space in a tiny footprint, DKW engineered a revolutionary front-engine, front-wheel drive system. By placing a compact two-cylinder, two-stroke engine ahead of the front axle and driving the front wheels, they completely eliminated the need for a rear drive shaft. This allowed the Schnelaster to have an incredibly low, perfectly flat cargo floor sitting merely 16 inches off the ground. Furthermore, utilizing a trailing arm rear suspension meant there was no bulky rear axle to get in the way, providing an astonishingly vast rear compartment for a vehicle of its diminutive size. The DKW Schnelaster became an unsung hero of the German economic miracle, serving as everything from an emergency ambulance to a multi-passenger microbus capable of carrying nearly 2,000 pounds of payload. It laid the crucial engineering groundwork for the modern front-wheel drive vans we see absolutely everywhere today. Its adorable aerodynamic design remains a cult classic among vintage European auto enthusiasts who appreciate its clever space-saving ingenuity. However, while DKW was busy perfecting the compact front-wheel drive microbus for local deliveries, another German company was preparing to revolutionize the heavy-duty coach industry by throwing away the traditional truck chassis entirely. By the early 1950s, the global coach-building industry was stuck in a massive heavy rut. Buses were essentially just heavy, awkward passenger bodies bolted onto rigid, bone-shaking commercial truck chassis. This resulted in a terrible, uncomfortable ride and massive, inefficient weight that consumed vast amounts of fuel. The German manufacturer Bohrer decided to completely shatter this paradigm with the legendary Setra S8. At first glance, the S8 might look like a beautifully restored classic coach with its elegant streamlined curves and panoramic windows, but its true weirdness and brilliance lie hidden entirely beneath its shiny, polished exterior skin. The Setra S8 didn't just solve the weight and comfort problem, it revolutionized the entire global bus industry forever. The name Setra actually stands for the German word selbsttragend, which translates directly to self-supporting. Introduced in 1951, the S8 was the world's very first bus featuring a fully integral unibody construction. Instead of bolting a body to a heavy ladder-frame truck chassis, the bus itself was built as a single, rigid, tubular steel skeleton. This incredible engineering feat drastically reduced the vehicle's overall weight by thousands of pounds, significantly improved structural safety in the event of a crash, and allowed for a much lower center of gravity. Powered by a rear-mounted Henschel engine, the S8 was a massive, immediate success, comfortably cruising at highway speeds of up to 60 miles per hour. It proved once and for all that buses didn't have to be glorified tractors. They could be sophisticated, purpose-built luxury highway cruisers. Bohrer's unibody concept was eventually adopted by almost every major bus manufacturer on the planet, cementing the S8's legacy as one of the most important transit vehicles ever built. Yet, while the West was focused on luxurious, lightweight highway cruisers, engineers behind the Iron Curtain were designing an iconic transit bus that looked like it had eaten a little too much at the dinner table. Welcome to Eastern Europe in the late 1950s. As industrial cities rapidly expanded after the war, public transportation authorities faced a critical need for a rugged, reliable, and incredibly high-capacity bus that could navigate both tight, ancient city streets and unforgiving, unpaved rural roads. Czechoslovakia answered the call with the unforgettable Skoda 706 RTO. Visually, this bus is an absolute masterpiece of mid-century quirkiness. It is affectionately known worldwide for its bulbous, dramatically rounded face, gigantic, friendly-looking headlights, and a perfectly symmetrical, almost egg-like silhouette that makes it one of the most instantly recognizable vehicles of the entire communist bloc. Beneath that charmingly chubby exterior was a masterclass in robust, no-nonsense, heavy-duty engineering. Unlike the Setra, the Skoda 706 RTO was built on a heavily modified, nearly indestructible truck chassis specifically designed to survive the harshest Eastern European winters. It tipped the scales at a massive 19,000 pounds empty. It was powered by an enormous 11.8-liter inline-six diesel engine mounted right up front, directly next to the driver. To solve the problem of passenger flow, engineers designed an incredibly spacious interior with large, wide-opening pneumatic doors and a heavily curved panoramic windshield that provided exceptional visibility for navigating chaotic pedestrian-heavy urban centers. The 706 RTO became an absolute cultural icon, serving tirelessly not just in Czechoslovakia but across the entire Soviet sphere, exported heavily to countries like Poland and Bulgaria. It was adapted into city buses, luxury intercity coaches, capable of hitting 53 miles per hour, and even bizarre articulated versions to haul massive crowds. Today, its wonderfully round, nostalgic shape makes it a highly prized collector's item in Europe. But while the Czechs were busy perfecting the ultimate terrestrial workhorse, the Soviets themselves were aiming for the stars, designing a city bus that looked like it belonged in a science fiction movie. Deep in the heart of the Cold War, the Soviet Union wanted to prove their technological superiority not just in the space race, but right down to their daily public transit. The problem was their existing buses were desperately outdated, front-heavy, and incredibly uncomfortable for passengers on long routes. The Lviv bus plant accepted the challenge and delivered the wildly futuristic LAZ-695. When it debuted in 1956, it looked like a retro-futuristic spaceship that had accidentally landed on a Moscow street. It featured massive curved panoramic windows, a dramatic sloped rear end, and gigantic roof-mounted air intakes that looked exactly like rocket thrusters. The engineering behind the LAZ-695 was radically different from anything the Soviets had ever built. Seeking a smoother ride, engineers completely abandoned the traditional front-engine layout. Instead, they mounted a robust ZILV-8 engine all the way in the rear of the bus. This not only dramatically reduced noise and toxic exhaust fumes in the passenger cabin, but also allowed for a much more flexible and comfortable interior layout. Furthermore, those massive rooftop air intakes weren't just for show. They ingeniously funneled clean, dust-free air from high above the road directly down into the rear-mounted engine, brilliantly solving the massive problem of engine suffocation on dusty, unpaved Soviet dirt roads. The LAZ-695 became a massive triumph of Soviet engineering, remaining in continuous production in various modernized forms for an astonishing 50 years. Its space-age design actually earned it a legendary place in real space history when specially modified versions like the LAZ-695B were used to transport legendary Soviet cosmonauts, including Yuri Gagarin, directly to the Baikonur launch pad. However, while the Soviets were enjoying their rear-engine space-age transit, American engineers were preparing to unleash a curved glass legend that would permanently define the golden age of stateside public transportation. In the late 1950s, the United States was experiencing an unprecedented economic boom, but public transit ridership was steadily declining as more Americans bought cheap, stylish private cars. General Motors realized they had a massive problem. They needed to make riding the bus feel as modern, luxurious, and visually exciting as driving a brand-new tail-finned Cadillac. Their magnificent solution was the GM New Look bus, universally nicknamed the Fishbowl. Visually, this transit bus is an absolute stunner. It is defined entirely by its iconic, complex six-piece domed windshield that protrudes forward, giving it the distinct, bubbly appearance of a giant rolling glass aquarium. The Fishbowl was an engineering marvel designed entirely around visibility and the passenger experience. That massive, weirdly shaped windshield wasn't just for aesthetics. It offered the driver an unparalleled, nearly 180-degree field of vision, finally solving the notorious, dangerous blind spot problems of older flat-front transit buses. Under the skin, GM utilized advanced aircraft-style stressed skin aluminum construction, making the bus incredibly lightweight yet remarkably strong without a heavy traditional frame. Coupled with a powerful rear-mounted Detroit diesel engine and an advanced air ride suspension system, the Fishbowl delivered a buttery smooth ride that genuinely rivaled the comfort of high-end American luxury cars of the era. The GM Fishbowl was a spectacular, absolute runaway success. With over 44,000 units produced over its lifespan, it became the undisputed king of North American transit, starring in countless Hollywood movies like Speed and defining the urban landscape for 3 solid decades. Weighing around 20,000 pounds, it successfully made heavy-duty bus travel cool again. But while GM was using huge curved glass to bring luxury to wide, open American avenues, British engineers were facing a completely different, purely architectural nightmare that required a dramatically squished, low-profile vehicle solution to safely navigate ancient infrastructure. Throughout the mid-20th century, British bus operators faced a uniquely frustrating geographical nightmare. The country was littered with ancient arch stone railway bridges that traditional 14-foot-tall double-decker buses simply could not fit under without violently peeling their roofs off. The standard solution was to use single-deckers on these routes, which terribly compromised passenger capacity and profits. The brilliant engineers at Bristol Commercial Vehicles answered this massive problem with the Bristol Lodekka. At first glance, it looks like a classic British double-decker, but upon closer inspection, you realize it sits bizarrely, almost uncomfortably close to the pavement, looking completely squashed compared to a standard London Routemaster. The sheer engineering brilliance of the Lodekka lies in its revolutionary drivetrain and chassis design. To dramatically lower the overall height of the bus to just 13.5 feet without sacrificing precious interior passenger headroom, Bristol invented a completely flat-floor drop-center rear axle. Instead of a bulky drive shaft running straight down the middle of the bus and forcing the floor upwards, the Lodekka used a specially designed transmission that routed the drive shaft neatly down the extreme right side of the chassis. This ingenious layout allowed the ground floor passenger aisle to be dropped significantly lower than the wheel arches. The Bristol Lodekka was an absolute godsend for provincial British transport operators. It successfully conquered the treacherous low bridges across the United Kingdom, allowing highly profitable, high-capacity double-deckers weighing roughly 16,000 pounds to finally operate on routes previously restricted to much smaller vehicles. It remains a legendary piece of clever British problem-solving. But while the British were intelligently lowering their buses to survive low bridges, an American manufacturer was about to create a strange microbus that placed the driver in a position that regulators would eventually argue was far too close to danger. Moving into the swinging 1960s, America saw a massive surge in demand for compact, highly maneuverable utility vehicles that could serve as both urban cargo haulers and hippie-style passenger campers. The big three automakers raced to create the perfect forward-control microbus. Dodge's radically aggressive answer was the Dodge A100. Visually, this machine is wonderfully weird. It features a shockingly flat, utterly vertical front fascia with striking, bug-eyed headlights. It looks less like a traditional van and more like a heavy-duty brick that has been chopped completely in half, with the driver seemingly sitting right out over the front bumper. To achieve maximum interior cargo space within a super-short 90-inch wheelbase, Dodge engineers pushed the cab-over engine design to the absolute extreme. They placed the driver and passenger seats directly on top of the front axle, with the engine tucked snugly between them inside a massive insulated doghouse console. This solved the cargo space problem brilliantly, allowing the A100 to carry a massive payload for its size. Furthermore, its lightweight rear end and available highly powerful V8 engines made it surprisingly fast, capable of hitting over 100 miles per hour, turning this bizarre-looking utility brick into a formidable powerhouse on the drag strip. The A100 became a massive pop culture icon, most notably as the legendary wheelie-popping Little Red Wagon. However, this is the very vehicle we teased at the beginning of the video. Its radical design meant the driver's legs were essentially the vehicle's front crumple zone. As highway speeds increased and strict federal safety standards emerged in the late 1970s, this extreme flat-nose forward control design failed to provide adequate crash protection. It was considered dangerously radical by safety advocates, and modern crash regulations effectively ban this specific ultra-flat design style, regulating it out of existence for passenger vans. By the late 1970s, American cities were facing a gritty, difficult reality. Urban decay and rising vandalism meant that the beautiful, fragile, curved glass of the beloved GM Fishbowl was becoming an incredibly expensive nightmare to maintain. Transit authorities demanded a vehicle that was tough, futuristic, and completely vandal-proof. General Motors responded with the Rapid Transit Series, or GM RTS. When it hit the streets in 1977, it looked like a 40-foot-long armored personnel carrier designed for a sci-fi action movie. It featured a severe, heavily sloped, wedge-shaped front end, sharp geometric lines, and dark, flush-mounted windows. The RTS was engineered from the ground up to be completely indestructible. To solve the rampant vandalism problem, GM built the bus using a massive, heavy-duty stainless steel modular frame wrapped in thick, unpaintable fiberglass and acrylic body panels that easily resisted dents, scratches, and graffiti. The windows were made of highly durable, scratch-resistant polycarbonate instead of fragile glass, specifically designed to withstand thrown rocks and severe impacts. Weighing nearly 26,000 pounds, it featured an advanced independent front suspension and a pioneering wheelchair lift system, making it one of the first truly accessible, modern heavy-duty transit buses. The GMC RTS looked tough, and it absolutely was. It dominated American streets well into the 21st century, becoming the quintessential, unyielding symbol of 1980s and 90s urban transit. Its brutalist wedge-shaped design proved that buses could evolve to meet the harshest demands of modern city life, wrapping up our incredible journey from elegant 1930s Art Deco Beetles to armored graffiti-proof urban warriors. These 10 machines prove that when automotive engineers are pushed to their absolute limits to solve impossible problems, the results are nothing short of wonderfully, perfectly bizarre. So, did you guess the mystery vehicle? It was the Dodge A100. Its extreme flat-nosed design put the driver right at the impact zone, leading federal safety regulations to banish that ultra-forward control style for passenger vans forever. From massive hybrid double-deckers to space-age Soviet cruisers that carried cosmonauts, which of these bizarre problem-solving buses was your absolute favorite? Let me know in the comments below. Please do not forget to hit that like button, subscribe for more deep dives into automotive history, and I will see you soon.